And welcome back, rugby fans, to Rugby 411. As always, I'm your host. My name is Joshua Shibata, and this is our MLR Power Rankings for Week 13. We are entering into the last quarter of the 2022 MLR season. Just 4 weeks left. It is amazing how quick this season goes. I'm sorry, it's 5 weeks left in the season, but it's still, either way, it's amazing again how quick this season has gone. The playoff picture is starting to develop, but there's still more than 3 teams competing for 3 very valuable playoff spots in both in the West Division. In the East, there might be a 4th team competing, but right now it's really the 2nd and 3rd place teams fighting over that home field advantage. Again, the playoff format is the 1st place team in each division gets a bye, 2nd hosts the number 3 team, and then the winner of that goes against the number 1 team in the division championships, and the winners of those play for the MLR Shield. Of course, the one with the best record gets the home field advantage. There is no neutral venue site in MLR yet, so every point and win counts. So, as always, these MLR Power Rankings are not based off of the standings. It is based off of the performance on the pitch. It is based off of who I feel is the best team that week. Things that play a factor are strength of your opponent, if you're playing at home or if you're playing away, your recent activity, whether you're coming off of a losing streak, your winning streak, all that. Again, it plays off of what's going on the pitch. There's been a lot of movement in both the top and the middle, not necessarily the bottom, but some interesting wins, an upset for sure. But some very interesting development. I feel the last couple weeks have been kind of, but this week has definitely been interesting. And again, kind of reflects in the Super Brew Rugby 411 Pick'em Pool, which we'll go into in the next video. The last couple weeks, everybody's been going perfect with our picks. The winner, the one with the gold cap, did not get a perfect pick for the week, but still was able to get the win. So that tells you just how unpredictable these games were. That's also how exciting these games were. But enough of that. Let's go into the power rankings. Unfortunately, again, I feel this team is going to be stuck at the number 13 for the rest of the season, sadly. And that is the new kids on the block, the Dallas Jackals, who have suffered yet another landslide beatdown. 74-7 loss to the Seattle Seawolves in Starfire Stadium. Is sadly not the biggest margin of defeat that the Jackals have lost by. It might be the most points that the Seattle Seawolves have ever scored, 11 tries. We'll go more into that when we talk about them. But, yeah, still not looking very good for the Dallas Jackals. Number 12, Nolo Gold, the only team that had a bye this week, so they don't go anywhere. Number 11, a team that slid down a couple of spots and sadly has been on a slide recently. The only exception is a win against the Dallas Jackals, and that is the San Diego Legion, who had a very competitive game, but unfortunately lost to the Houston Sabre Cats. A very, very important game because San Diego and Houston are 2 teams that are competing for one of those Western Conference playoff spots. The 1 and the 2 position have pretty much been locked up by Austin and LA. So just that number 3 position, Houston, San Diego, and Seattle are all fighting for that spot. Seattle lost a very, very important game to Houston. Started out kind of competitive, but unfortunately ended up falling behind. They lost 24-34. It should be mentioned that Ryan Matias scored a try for San Diego. Ryan Matias is was a member of the USA Eagles team who just recently announced his retirement from international competition. Ryan Matias is a real big advocate for rugby in America. He's done a lot to work with the youth programs in San Diego and across the country, not only in the USA, but around the world, too. He's played all over in New Zealand, Australia, and Europe. and he's worked a lot with youth programs all over the world. So he's going to continue playing for San Diego, just he's not going to be working in the off-season for the Eagles team, especially this year as they're working for qualification for next year's Rugby World Cup. So a big miss for the Eagles. But again, Ryan Matias, congratulations on everything that you've done, and good luck with, again, continuing the work for the San Diego Legions and the youth programs in San Diego. Moving on to number 10. As much as I wanted to move them, I don't feel comfortable moving up a team after suffering a loss. But man, Old Glory DC is looking more and more like a different team since their start. Now, granted, when they first started the season, they had a lot of close games. Like, their record probably should look a little bit better than what it is right now. But they played very, very competitively against New England, the arguably the number one team record-wise in MLR, one of the top teams in our power ranking. But man, Old Glory went toe-to-toe with New England. There were some questionable calls in the game, but ultimately I don't think they made a huge factor. What did make a huge factor is the fact that Old Glory came in with a lot of members of the team not playing. Trent Palamo had a broken thumb. Renata Roberts-Tanana, a very dynamic, explosive player, had a hamstring injury. And then, unfortunately, Jameson Fanana Schultz was suspended for the rest of the season for a red card infraction in last week's game. So 3 really important players on the team, and yet Old Glory was very, very competitive, losing by only 6 points, 20-26, a very, very competitive game. So again, as much as I wanted to move them up, because again, they played against one of the top teams, could have won the game maybe, but I don't feel comfortable moving a team up unless there's a lot of teams that start to lose and fall down. So Old Glory stays at number 10. Number 9, though, is a new team, as we have the Toronto Arrows starting to backslide as well. Just like San Diego, from number 6 down to number 9. Suffering kind of an upset in my book. They're playing in York Lions Stadium in Toronto, losing to Rugby New York. Rugby New York has been struggling a little bit. I felt the Arrows might have had the home field advantage in this one, but Rugby New York played really, really well. Actually, the Arrows looked very, very shell-shocked in the game, losing 17-34 to Rugby New York. That's definitely a big boost for Rugby New York. That kind of dampers the Arrows' chances at a playoff spot. We'll see what happens in the end. But Arrows sliding down from number 6 to number 9, kind of sliding out of the playoff contention as well. Number 8, a team that even though they put up the most points, I believe, in franchise history, Seattle Seawolves, your 2-time MLR champions, I did not feel comfortable having them go up because those 74 points went against a very, very, very weak team, the Dallas Jackals, who have become the poster boys, who've become the punching bag to almost every team in the MLR, unfortunately. So the Seattle Seawolves stay at number 8, but stay in contention for that very precious number 3 playoff spot between them, San Diego, and Houston. Also sliding down a couple of spots in what I felt was the upset of the game, Rugby ATL. It's kind of surprising. In just a couple of weeks, they went from the number 1 team in the power rankings all the way down to number 7. Granted, they lost to the LA Guiltinis, but then losing to a team like the Houston Sabercats, not taking anything away. I'm sorry, losing to a team like the Utah Warriors, not taking anything away from Utah, but Utah has been struggling tremendously this season. ATL definitely looked like they should have been the better team. Granted, they were playing in Utah. They are on a losing streak right now, but man, the way that Utah handled them, there was almost no redeeming value. 44-26 was the game. Yeah, ATL kind of teetering down at probably the worst time of the season as we're heading into the home stretch. Fortunately for them, they kind of have a playoff spot locked up, but they're fighting now with Rugby New York to see who's going to host that game, because I don't feel either Atlanta or Rugby New York has a chance of overthrowing the Free Jacks from the number one spot. So hosting that semifinal game is really, really important. So Rugby ATL needs to bounce back and bounce back quick. Moving on, the next team is the team that defeated Rugby ATL, and that's the Utah Warriors. They make the biggest jump this week from the number 11 spot all the way to number 6. And yes, I do feel that jump is warranted. I mean, granted the game was in Utah, but man, Utah has not been playing well at all this year, with the exception of pounding again on the Dallas Jackals. But their game against Atlanta was impressive. They looked like the team of last year. They looked like the Utah Warriors of 2021. The Utah Warriors that I felt were going to show up in 2022. Unfortunately, their playoff chances are pretty much out the window. But with that performance, man, they are still a very, very dangerous team to play. And they have games against pretty much all Western opponents. So they can screw up some playoff chances. They have a game against Seattle. They have a game against Houston. I don't believe they have San Diego left, but I know they have LA. They can really screw up some playoff chances if they play as dangerously as they did against Atlanta. So kudos to Utah for moving up in the power rankings. But again, I think a little too late for their playoff chances. Number 5, another team that slid down, losing this week, was the Austin Gilgronis. Now, their game was the battle for the Western Conference. Granted, Austin is still in first place, but they do have a game up on the LA Giltinis, meaning LA still has to play one more game in the season to even up, but they're still ahead of LA by, I believe, 6 points, if I look at by 6 points. So even if LA wins with a bonus point, they'll still be 1 point behind. So LA still needs Austin to lose another game, but Austin has been kind of struggling lately as well, just like ATL, just like San Diego, kind of fading out at the worst possible time. Again, rugby, I've learned, especially with MLR, is a season-long attrition. It's about not necessarily starting off hot, even though that has helped Seattle stay in the playoff contention because of their hot start, but it really is about staying as healthy as possible and being ready to hit your stride at the end of the season. That's where it matters. If you have the healthiest team at the end, you're more than likely going to be the team that walks into the playoffs and possibly walks away with a championship. Right now, Austin, Atlanta, San Diego are teams that are really struggling. Granted, the game against LA was very, very close, 8-10. If you saw the game, Austin scored a literally last-second try to make the game within 2. No offense to Will McGee, the kicker for Austin. It almost was a chip shot to make, and unfortunately he missed the shot. Granted, it would have just tied the game up, but those are precious points. It's a difference between 2 points for LA and 4 points for LA, and those points make a difference. Austin, with that missed kick at the end, it cost them a lot, and right now LA has a good chance to maybe jump Austin for that number 1 spot, get the bye, also the ability to host the championship game of the Western Conference, which will be very, very crucial for LA. But again, there's still a lot in the season. If Austin can still stay relatively good for the remainder of the season, they can still hold on to that first place spot in the Western Conference. Moving on, number 4. We're going now to our top 4. We have a new member of the top 4. That's the Houston SaberCats, who kind of like Utah, has now started to show up quite a bit. They had a very, very impressive win against San Diego, so they're moving up. They're another team that I feel right now is very, very dangerous. which is good for them. Not so good for some of their Western Conference opponents for the remainder of the season. I'm kind of glad that LA doesn't have to play them. They've already played them twice this season, but Houston is definitely a dangerous team right now. They're moving up into the top 4, moving up a spot from number 5 to number 4. Now, also making a big jump is Rugby New York. Welcome back to the top 4, Rugby New York, after a very, very good win against the Toronto Arrows. It also helps that a lot of teams above them, ATL, Austin Gilgronis, have lost. That allowed Rugby New York to slide up after that impressive win of 34-17 over the Arrows in Toronto, mind you. Number 1 and number 2 for this week's power rankings have not changed, though both of them, I have to admit, struggled quite a bit in their games, but completely different games. New England, the Free Jacks, your number 2 team, struggled with arguably one of the lower-ranked teams. Though Old Glory has played much, much better than the record, but man, that game was a lot closer than it should have been, in my opinion, especially when you are ranking standings-wise the best team in MLR with only 1 loss. Coincidentally, that 1 loss is to the LA Giltinis, but only 1 loss so far in the league, the best record of all MLR teams. Sad news, I don't know what the status is of Bodine Waka, but Bodine Waka unfortunately got hurt in his game. We don't know if it's a serious injury, but if Bodine Waka can't play, that is a huge hit to the New England Free Jacks. So, I don't recall exactly what the rest of the New England schedule is. I know that they have a game with ATL next week, which is going to be huge, and they also have a game with Rugby New York. So there is a chance that the Free Jacks can drop out of that number 1 spot. So having Bodine Waka in the lineup is going to be very, very crucial to maintaining the number 1 spot in the Eastern Conference, and the number 1 spot in the Western Conference, and the number 1 spot in the power rankings goes to your reigning and defending MLR champions, the LA Giltinis. I'll admit, wasn't a great game against Austin. I was there at the world-famous Coliseum. It was a very physical game, as we knew it was going to be. Fortunately for LA, because of the blessed TMO, 2 of Austin's tries were called back. One of them, I believe, was a obstruction. The other was a line-out that didn't go 5. So LA got very, very lucky with those. But at the same time, there were a lot of mistakes that Austin made. But again, LA was not able to capitalize on those mistakes either. It was not a great game by LA, but LA made less mistakes, and they were very fortunate. I mean, the defense was really great. They held Austin to only 8 points. I believe that's the lowest that Austin has ever scored this season. It's also the lowest that LA has scored this season, 10 points. But the defense of LA has, again, I've always talked about how underrated it is, but it came out in this game. It was a very hard-fought victory of a game, a must-need win. And now, you know, looking at the rest of the schedule, not giving disrespect to any of the Western Conference teams, but LA plays all Western Conference teams from here on out. They have a game next week against San Diego, who are floundering. They have a game against Utah, which will be very, very dangerous of a game. They have the Dallas Jackals, and they have the Seattle Seawolves. You know, it's very possible that LA can run the gamut of 4 more victories, which will be a huge streak. Right now, LA is actually on the biggest win streak that their franchise of 7 straight wins. Possibly can catch up with New England, though New England is currently, I believe, on number 9 of their wins. So we'll see how long either of these streaks continue. But LA has a good chance of making it pretty well into the playoff scenario. Shout out to Luke White, co-captain of the LA Giltinis, 50th cap for MLR. He is the 13th player of MLR history to make 50 caps. Congratulations to Luke White. And again, it was a very hard-fought victory for LA. So, looking at the power rankings, again, the picture is forming. We have the top teams in the Western and Eastern Conference. We have the teams fighting for playoff spots. We have some teams starting to slide down at times when they probably shouldn't because their playoff contentions are in jeopardy. And then, of course, you have your teams that are just going to kind of sit at the bottom, unfortunately. So, but as always, let me know what you think about the power rankings. Hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you on the pitch.